We've had this wonderful setup. We got this amazing venue. So I was looking for like bars and clubs and stuff in Bucharest last night, and I found this place. And normally, we'd be spending €1,000 a table to be able to hang out in this building. So this is amazing. They've done a fantastic job on it. And also, check it out. Look, this is huge Dylan. This is the biggest version of me I've ever been on a stage with, which is pretty cool. And welcome. I am aware that my talk is the last thing between you and the party with the music and the beer and all the fun, but I got some important stuff that I want to talk to you about, and I'm going to hopefully do it in a way that you will find interesting and engaging. And I'm going to kick things off with a question. And I know normally the questions are at the end and you ask the questions, but I'm going to ask the question, I ask at the beginning: is internet access a fundamental human right? Now, this is the kind of hypothetical question that lawyers like to talk about in hotel bars late at night. But earlier this year, it actually became a very real and a very immediate question. On the 28th of February, Mikhail Fedorov, who's the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, and the Ukrainian Minister for Digital Transformation, he sent a letter to Horan Marbi, who is the chief executive of ICANN, the Internet Consortium for Assigned Names and Numbers, asking ICANN to do three very specific things: to revoke permanently or temporarily the domains RU, Fera there is the Russian Federation in Cyrillic, and .su was the Soviet Union domain name, which apparently is still a thing that exists, to contribute to revoking the SSL certificates for all of those domains, and to shut down the 2 DNS root servers that were situated in the Russian Federation. Now, I have been to Ukraine many, many times. This is me in Kiev 2-3 years ago. And I have met people there who run startups. I've met entrepreneurs. I've met developers, outsourced teams. The transformation that has happened there in terms of their digital industry is pretty amazing. And so I think that the Ukrainian Minister for Digital Transformation is probably a pretty competent person who is pretty good at their job. We have a Minister for Digital Culture in the UK. It's a lady called Nadine Dorries. And a few months ago, she met with Microsoft and asked them to ban algorithms. So as a British person, seeing a competent politician running digital transformation, that's a pretty amazing thing. Now, I believe Mr. Fedorov knew full well that ICANN were going to say no, and sure enough, the response came back a few days later saying, we understand why you're asking for this, and we sympathize and we stand with Ukraine, but that's not what we do. ICANN has been built to ensure that the internet works, not for its coordination role to be used to stop it from working. Now, Mr. Fedorov sent another letter that day to an organization that some of you may have heard of. Many of you probably haven't. It's an organization called RIPE NCC. Now, RIPE is not an internet provider. RIPE does not own any cables, any data centers, any servers, infrastructure. But if RIPE ceased to exist, the internet would stop working. Not right away. It would be okay today. It would probably be okay tomorrow. But then maybe a month or two from now, you'd notice that there were some websites you couldn't get to anymore. There were some people who your email to them was no longer getting through. And eventually, the internet as we know it would cease to exist. And to understand why that happens, we kind of need to understand what the internet really is. Because when we draw diagrams and we talk about systems, we talk about connecting devices to the internet. And it's always, there's the device, and there's the connection, which is the arrow, the line with the arrows, and there is the internet. It's the big cloud at the top of the diagram. It's always at the top. And this is just the way that we as consumers and clients think about the internet. And, if you're a private individual like me, I probably spend, 50, 60 pounds a month on all my internet access. If you're a hotel with hundreds of guests, you probably pay a few €100. If you're a company working in tech, maybe your internet bill is thousands just to connect to the internet. But you get to a point where your company is so big that it doesn't make sense to talk about connecting to the internet because you own the cable. You own the infrastructure. You own the cellular towers on top of the buildings. And so the way that those companies talk to each other is they find their nearest internet exchange point, IXP. And they run a cable into that IXP, And then they say to all the other companies who are running cables in, hey, how about it if you carry our traffic, we'll carry your traffic. And fundamentally, that's what the internet is. When I talk to you on Zoom, or I send you an email, or connect to your website, that traffic is bouncing through all of these internet exchange points and the companies that own the infrastructure, and it eventually comes out the other end. And RIPE is the organization that exists in Europe and the Middle East to facilitate those agreements. RIPE covers, this is the part of the world that RIPE looks after. It's a thing called a regional internet registry. There is another one here. This is ARIN, covers North America. LACNIC covers Latin America to Caribbean. AFRINIC covers Africa. And APNIC covers Asia Pacific. And between them, these organizations represent just about every internet provider, mobile phone company, university, tech giant, all the people who own the cables and the towers and the infrastructure that makes the internet work. So when Mikhailo Fedorov wrote to RIPE and said, can you help us shut down the internet in Russia, what he's doing is he's saying to RIPE, can you go to your 18,000 different members and say to them, hey, can you look at all your agreements? Go through everybody you've ever agreed to carry traffic for and look whether that agreement might end up sending traffic to Russia. Oh, by the way, don't block any traffic that's only going as far as Ukraine. That's really important. But if it's going through Ukraine to Russia, then you can't carry that traffic anymore. And, RIPE turned around and they said, no. They said, this is not what we are for. This is not what we're going to do. We believe that internet number resource registrations should not be used to enforce political outcomes, and that doing so would have serious implications for the internet, not just in the Russian Federation, but also for the rest of the world. So, cutting off a country from the internet, it's not easy. You can't do it from the outside because the organizations, the internet was built to survive these kinds of attacks and disruptions. We were never ever intending to cut bits of it off. Now, in 2020, October 2020, this guy, Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, addressed the European Parliament. And during that address, it was an event called Ideas for a New World. He said that we need governments, companies, civil society, and citizens to work together now to create this digital future. A future where internet access is understood and realized as a basic human right. Now, we got ICANN, we've got RIPE, we've got Tim Berners-Lee, and if you really want to go for the big guns when it comes to rights, we're going to go to 1948. We are going to go to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations. Now, they didn't have Wi-Fi in 1948, so they forgot to put it in the Declaration. But what they did say, Article 19, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression, freedom to hold opinions without interference, and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Sounds to me like cutting somebody off the internet is kind of going to violate that. And there is another clause in there, section 27.1, everyone has the right to freely participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. So we've got ICANN, we've got RIPE, we've got Tim Berners-Lee, we've got the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I want to be in that gang, so I'm going to stand here and say, yes, I think that internet access is a fundamental human right. But if we're going to go around saying that, we need to think, well, what is it? What is this internet access thing that we think people have the right to? And I would suggest what we are talking about is this. First, the right to connect to the network and to be assigned an IP address for as long as you need one. Second, if you transmit a properly formed, correctly addressed packet across the internet and your destination address exists, your packet will reach its destination. And third, anybody else, anywhere on the internet, if they send a correctly formed packet to you, that packet will be delivered. That's it. That is internet access, the ability to send packets to somebody, to an address, and expect that they will be delivered, and if they reply, that reply will be delivered to you. Now, there has been some controversy about this. I want you to imagine for 1 second that all of us, we all work for the government agency that maintains the roads. And we decide we're not making enough money because the government pays us, a salary and they cover maintenance. But we're like, nah, come on. Private initiative. Let's get capitalist here. And we have a good idea. We're like, well, forget this. Get rid of the speed limit. We're going to make deals. So we get a BMW. And we're like, hey, BMW, How much money will you give us if we give all your BMW drivers a different speed limit? What about if they can do BMW 170 kilometers an hour? And BMW jump on this. They're like, yeah, have 100 billion lei or whatever, 100,000 euros, $100 million, we don't care. And then we go to Audi and we're like, hey, you heard about what we've done with BMW? And Audi are like, oh, we got to have that. We can't have BMW drivers going faster than Audi drivers. So they give us €1 billion to do that. And then we go to Ford, and Ford say, actually, our cars don't go that fast, but we could do 150, so they give us a bit of money for that. And Toyota are like, well, 90 is probably safe enough for people who buy Toyotas. And all the other cars were like, right, everyone else, you haven't paid us 50 kilometers an hour. That's the limit for all of you. And then the oil companies come to us and they go, we'll give you like this massive sack of money if you make it illegal to drive electric cars on the road. And we go, all right, we want a massive sack of money. And there it is. And the freeway, the highway, the road, that is no longer a public utility. It is a product that is being sold to the highest bidder. And we don't care about people who haven't paid us because they're not our problem. Now, there are companies all over the world who are desperate to do this to the internet. In the United States, almost all domestic internet access, people getting broadband at home to watch Netflix and do Zoom meetings, all that kind of stuff, it is dominated by these 4 big providers: Comcast, AT&T, Verizon, and Charter Communications. And in large parts of the US, you can get one of these. There's no choice. You live in a Comcast neighborhood, you get Comcast, or you don't have internet. That is the choice. Now, in 2007, a group of Comcast users noticed that they were downloading some special binary files from a website about pirates, and they noticed that that traffic was going too slowly. Their regular web traffic was fine, but anything coming over the BitTorrent protocol was being throttled. And so they filed a complaint with the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. This is the arm of the US government that controls telephones and telegraph systems. And they said, we are paying Comcast for internet access and they are throttling it. We are not getting the service that we are paying for. And so the FCC sent a ruling to Comcast and said, you have to stop throttling traffic. You are not allowed to do this. And Comcast said, all right, sorry, we'll take the filters off. And then Comcast sued the FCC. Comcast versus the Federal Communications Commission went to court. It took 3 years. And at the end of that, the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, they ruled that the FCC did not have the authority to impose that order. Now, this is an interesting legal ruling. The FCC could have said, yeah, net neutrality is completely legal, or they could have said net neutrality is completely out and anyone can do anything they want. But what they said is, no, we think in just this one specific instance, the way that this has been enacted through the courts means they're going to win on a technicality. And that's legal secret code for try again and don't screw it up this time. And so the FCC, they took a step back and they drafted a thing called the US Open Internet Order, which guaranteed 3 things. Transparency. Your internet provider has to tell you what they are doing with your traffic. Do they throttle? Do they block? Do they filter? What do they do? You have the right to know that. They are not allowed to block any traffic for any reason other than like criminal investigations or proof of criminal intent. And they are not allowed to discriminate. They're not allowed to say, okay, well, Disney streaming is going to go faster than Netflix streaming because Disney gave us a bunch of money. And they published this order in 2010, and immediately Verizon sued them and said, you can't do that. No, we're not having that here. This is America. That's not how any of this works. That took another 4 years, and in 2014, again, the DC Circuit Court said, yep, Verizon is right. You are not allowed network neutrality. It interferes too much with capitalism. That is generally seen as the day that network neutrality died in the United States of America. It was a very, very sad day for network freedom advocates in the US, but to the rest of the world, it was a, holy crap, did you see what they just did? Could that happen here? Could we do that? Should we do something about this now before it's too late? And so the European Union, in 2015, they drafted the EU Open Internet Regulation, in which they guaranteed transparency, no blocking, and no unreasonable discrimination, and that was passed. That is now law everywhere in the European Union. If you jump on the Wi-Fi here at the hotel and you try to get to someone's website and it's going slower than someone else's website, that is a crime. You can take them to court. They are breaking the law by doing that. So in Europe, and yes, I know I live on Brexit Island, but I'm in Romania right now, so I'm enjoying the freedoms of being in the European Union. This is guaranteed. Network neutrality is in law across the EU. Now, I think this is awesome and amazing and exciting and cool, but it turns out that normal humans do not care very much about network neutrality and traffic transparency, because normal humans care about things like music and photos and shopping and holidays and movies and friends and silly cat pictures. And within my lifetime, all of these things have gone from being analog, real-world, in-person activities to something you can do on the internet. And the thing that has caused that revolution is the World Wide Web. Now, I've been on the web a long, long time. I have been on the World Wide Web since 1992. This was the logo of the web when it was first invented. And I remember when this was new and shiny. And, you know, this was designed by a guy called Robert Callio in 1990. And I started building websites way back in the early 90s, and I have never looked back. I love it. I loved doing it in the 90s. I love building websites now. And one of the reasons that building websites has always been such a joy is that browsers are an incredibly tolerant, forgiving platform. If you've ever spent any time writing C or Java or C# or any of those languages, this will look familiar to you. You know, you have a little program, and you're like, yeah, that looks pretty good. All right. And you go, let's compile it, hello.c. And the computer goes, ha, stupid human, you missed a semicolon. We are not even going to attempt to run your program because you are too stupid to use a computer. But HTML, you can sit down, you can be like, I'm going to write a web page here. I'm going to have a head, and then I got a head. I wonder, can I have a face? Yeah, because I got a head, I have a face. It's Dylan's page. And there's a body, and I got an H1, that's a heading. And I'm going to have a font, color equals red, because I want this thing to be red. And I'm going to have a break, because those are cool. I'm going to have font color equals blue, and another break. And then I'm going to put in a picture of my cat, because I like cats. And this is image, source equals cat, name equals Mac. Mac likes snacks, so Mac likes equals snack. And then slash body, and then I've got a head and a body, so I guess I should probably have some feet. So my web page has got feet. And then I'm going to close the HTML, but I'm going to close HTLM because I made a mistake. And if you take this code and you throw it at a web browser, it goes, hey, yeah, that's fine. Like, I don't understand some of what you did here, but I'm going to try and help you. I am going to try and make sense of what it is that you have sent me here. Now, this, I think, is a wonderful example of something called Postel's law. This is John Postel. John wrote the specification for TCP/IP way back in 1980, and in that spec, he included this recommendation: be conservative in what you send, and be liberal in what you accept. Now, there is, I think, a wonderful example of Postel's law, which predates TCP/IP. In fact, it has nothing to do with computers and the internet and stuff at all. And I kind of, you know, with everything that's going on in the world, I wasn't sure whether to put this bit in, but this is a story that gives me hope. This was 1975. It's the height of the Cold War, and there is a space mission called Apollo-Soyuz. It's a crew of American astronauts is going to go into orbit. They are going to rendezvous with a crew of Soviet cosmonauts flying a Soyuz capsule. They are going to dock in space, and they are going to shake hands through the capsule. And this historic photograph, this is Alexei Leonov and Tom Stafford shaking hands through the airlock. Now, they had to solve a lot of problems to get this mission to work: technical, engineering, fuel, orbital trajectories. But fundamentally, they had a language barrier, because none of the Russian cosmonauts spoke English, and none of the American astronauts spoke Russian. And so the rule they said was, throughout the mission, the Americans have to speak Russian, and the Russians have to reply in English. And they did studies. This is NASA, you know, they're not skimping on the sort of psychology of this thing. And what they discovered is that if you are speaking your second, third, fourth language, you have a much smaller vocabulary. So you are limited in what you can send because you don't know that many words. And the person who is listening to you They get to listen to the language they grew up with so they can help make sense of what it is that you are saying. So by using this choice of languages, that was enforcing Postel's law. They all had to be liberal in what they sent and conservative in what they accepted. And so this is kind of like me learning HTML. I'm Tom Stafford trying to speak Russian, and I'm getting everything wrong, and I don't know what I'm doing. But the browser is Alexei Leonov going, that is nonsense, but I think I understand. Is this the thing that you meant? Now, I love the web because of this, how incredibly tolerant browsers are and how much fun it is to explore them and figure out how to make things work. And so I've always tried to kind of keep up my end of the deal and write websites that aren't going to do anything terribly kind of esoteric and weird and ambitious. And for a long time, the web was full of weird hacks and plugins and extensions and cross-browser polyfills and all these kinds of things. And for a while, we had a thing called the browser wars, where Netscape and Internet Explorer were the two dominant web browsers, and they didn't even speak the same dialect of JavaScript. They had different programming models. You basically had to solve every problem twice, unless you stuck to a relatively kind of slimmed down subset of stuff that just worked everywhere. Now, I want you to get your phone out and open up this website here. Now, see, I'm a nerd. I have always been a nerd. I was the kind of nerd who, when I was at university, I used to make 3D rendered models of spaceships from Star Wars, and I put them on the internet because that was quite a cool thing to do. And the website that I made for it, it looks like this, for those of you who don't have it open. Now, does anyone in here, you remember when Star Wars The Phantom Menace came out with Jar Jar Binks and little baby Anakin and everything? Is anyone in here born after that? Anyone born after 1999? A couple of you must be. Yeah, we got a couple of hands. So all you folks there, I haven't touched this code since before you were born. When I say this website has been on the internet, I stopped updating this in 1998. The code for it looks like this. And all I've done is copy the files from my university account to my own server, and now it's running on GitHub Pages. I haven't updated anything. I haven't patched it. I haven't fixed anything. I literally have not changed a line of code for the entire time that you have been alive, and it still works. You can get your Android phone out of your pocket, you can open that up, and it works because it's not using Flash, and it's not using Shockwave, and it's not using Silverlight, and it's not using weird cross-browser JavaScript. It's being conservative in what it sends. It's just sending stuff that was pretty well supported, and sure enough, it's paid off. 20-something years later, that still works with no modifications. And yeah, I loved making websites in the 90s. I love making websites now because browsers now have got so many awesome APIs. We got a video and live streaming and audio, and we can play MIDI files. There's even a browser, like an API in your phone, that if you throw your phone in the air, it can tell how high you threw it and when it came down again, because the browser JavaScript can talk to the gravitational accelerator that your phone uses to tell when you tilt it. But as a developer, I love the web. It's fantastic. As an artist, as a creator, I love the web. As a consumer, I think the web sucks. The modern web is a horrible place to try and get anything done. And fundamentally, I think the reason for that is two things that the original creators of the web did not really think about. They didn't think about identity, and they didn't think about money. Now, okay, maybe it's disingenuous to say they didn't think about it. The web has always supported authentication. You've always been able to log in with usernames and passwords. And there is actually, if you dig into this is the HTTP 1.1 specification. June 1999, this was published the same month as Jar Jar Binks came out. And you read through that, there is an HTTP 402, payment required. This code is reserved for future use. Well, they've had 23 years, and they haven't done anything with it yet. Maybe it's coming soon. But, you know, the creators of the web, they were worrying about a whole bunch of stuff no one had ever done before. And so identity and money, they kind of got overlooked. They got missed out a little bit. And a lot of the problems and frustrations that exist on the modern web are directly attributable to those things. Now, there are fundamentally three kinds of online commerce. There is the kind where you put your name and address and credit card in the website, and the next morning you get a box arrives at your house. And if it's an Amazon box, it's a box about this big, and you open it up, and there's an SD card taped in the bottom. But, this is mail order. We were used to this. We did this before the internet. We used to send faxes or make phone calls. We'd give them details and credit card numbers, and they'd send us stuff. And then, yay, we got stuff, because I like stuff. And then we invented downloads. We invented, it's kind of stuff. Like, it's not a box, but we've got a song or a movie or a game that we didn't have yesterday. And as consumers, we're still kind of comfortable with the idea that we give you money and we get this thing that we didn't have before. But then there's content. There's the idea that the thing that has value is the actual website that you're looking at. The website's not a shop. The website is the value. It's the thing that's useful because you are reading articles or documentation or research. And that's where we've really failed to come up with a model that actually works. Now, early in my career, I spent a lot of time helping publishers figure out what to do about the web. And most of them went into that going, the web is a terrible idea and we need to kill it because it's a threat to commercial publishing. Because there was this model that still exists in some places where you want to make a newspaper. So you hire a bunch of journalists. Some of them, you pay them a salary, and they work for you. Some of them, you pay them 10 cents a word to write articles for you. Some of them, you give them $500 and say, go and write me an article about this that's about this long. And you put all that in your paper, and then you publish it, and you put in a crossword puzzle and the football results, and then you go to some advertisers, and you say, hey, there's 10,000 people reading my paper, and you end up with a package that people will pay money for. A couple of euros, a couple of pounds, a couple of dollars, like, yeah, I'll buy the paper, and they'll consume the content, and then they'll dispose of it. It has value to advertisers, it has value to the consumers, and it creates revenue that drives the source of content. And so when editorial and publishing companies tried to make sense of the web, they looked at the available models, and they're like, there is no equivalent of someone getting $3 out of their pocket to buy a newspaper on the web. That does not exist. Now, there's a lot of publishing models on the web, and almost all of them suck, except for one, which works very well in certain kinds of situations. I don't know if any of you remember at some point last year when suddenly your Twitter feed and Facebook started filling up with these little yellow and green and gray squares, and you're like, what is all this stuff? What is this Wordle thing here? And you click on it, and it's the word game that took the word by storm. Now, Wordle is beautiful. Wordle was created, Wordle's not a product, Wordle is not a startup, Wordle is a gift. Wordle was literally written by somebody as a present to his partner because his partner loved word games, and he's like, I'm gonna make a game for you, just as something nice. It was never designed to be anything commercial. It was something made with love by one person for another person. And then they shared it with a couple of friends, and it started doing the rounds, and it ended up on a WhatsApp group in New Zealand. And then somebody on Twitter came up with the idea of posting this little grid of emoji. And then the person who created it is a guy called Josh Wardle. If any of you are on Reddit and you remember the project called Place, Josh created that. He also created a thing called The Button about 5 years ago, which was just a button on the internet that every time someone pressed it, it would say, it's this long since anyone pressed the button. And it only lasted a minute, but it got pressed for something like 3.5 months before it finally ran out. Josh is brilliant at creating these wonderful, quirky little internet things. And he added a link button. He added a share in the app that would post this onto Twitter or WhatsApp, and boom, Wordle suddenly went viral. A bunch of people, they're in lockdown, they're bored, they're looking for something to do. By January this year, there were over 2 million people playing Wordle every single day. Is 2 million a lot of people? What's the population of Bucharest? 1.8, 1.9? So that's everybody in this city is playing Wordle every single day. 2 million is a lot of people. If you sell 2 million records, you get certified double platinum. If you are 2 million, that's 10 times more people saw the new Spider-Man movie when it opened last year, and everyone was like, yay, the pandemic is over, we're making money in cinemas again. 2 million is a lot of people. Now, how much does it cost for 2 million people to play Wordle? Let's work it out. This is Wordle. All of it. Wordle is 4 files. It's about 188K of JavaScript, and then it's HTML. It's a PNG file that isn't even part of the game. It's just there so when you add it to your home screen, you get something to click on, and it's the CSS file. 200 kilobytes. There is no back end. There are no cookies, there is no database, there are no servers, there is no Kubernetes, there are no containers. This is it, 200 kilobytes of HTML and JavaScript, and this contains 7 years' worth of words. So you can play Wordle for 7 years with these files, and you never need to talk to the internet ever again. It just lives on your device. Now, how much does it cost to host that to 2 million people? Well, this is Amazon's S3 bucket, and this is their current egress is 0.09 cents per gigabyte. So let's do the maths here. So we've got 9 cents per gigabyte. That's that much per megabyte, that much per kilobyte. So 200 kilobytes means it's $0.0018 per player. 2 million players, $36. Which is about, what, 200 Romanian lei? That's how much it cost to serve Wordle to 2 million people. Now, at this point, Josh Wardle is thinking, $36? What if everyone on the planet wanted to play Wordle? That's going to cost me like $100,000. I don't have that kind of money. And so he sold it to the New York Times. And you knew he sold it to the New York Times because first they took out some words they didn't like, and some players got very angry. And then a little banner appeared saying, "We're tracking your cookies." And you're like, that was it. That was beautiful while it lasted. But let's imagine that instead of selling Wordle to the New York Times, Josh Wardle sold it to us. And he said, "Here you go. I want you to run Wordle as a non-profit. You're allowed to cover your costs, but you're not allowed to make any money out of it." So we're like, "Hey, no problem. We'll put it on the Xbox store." And we think, well, this is going to be a problem. You ever tried to spend 0.00018 cents? The lowest valued currency in the world right now is the Iranian rial. And the Iranian rial is about 42,000 rials to the US dollar. So this is almost 1 rial, except the smallest coin they have is a 500. So this isn't going to work. We can't charge somebody that little amount of money. So we're like, okay, well, it's a non-profit. Okay, we're going to have to charge them like $1 to play this thing. And we think, all right, well, we'll take a credit card. They're going to take a cut, which is probably about 30%. So we've got 2 million people times 60, 70. We're going to make about $1.3 million per year. That's all right. We can probably run Wordle for $1.3 million. But of course, now that people are giving us $1 to play, we have problems. Because we need to make sure that the people who gave us money, they can get it, but other people can't. Because if the customers find out that other people are playing for free, they're going to get upset, and they're going to call customer services, and we don't have customer services. So we're going to need to build a database of all the people who paid. And all right, so now we need to hire a developer who can build the database for us. We're going to need, there's personal details like security, so we need a GDPR security expert. We got to set up a company for all the money, which means we need an accountant, which means, oh yeah, and when you buy something, you're going to want to email, and so we need to find an SMTP, and then we need someone to design the email for us. And suddenly I'm thinking, is 1.3 million bucks enough? Like, you know, we took this thing which was free, and then we wanted to charge $0.00018, and we couldn't do that. So we went for the lowest amount of money, which was $1, and suddenly we're like, I don't think we can make this thing worse. That gets 5,000 views, and maybe all of those people would give you 10 cents. But they're not going to, not because they don't think it's worth 10 cents, because spending 10 cents on the web is a massive pain in the ass. Now, the only way to work around this, one, you go for a walled garden. You build what you want and you put it in the Apple App Store. And people make good money by selling a very cheap app to a lot of people. And Apple are like, right, our rules, you got to through our approval process, we check it, we vet it, we take 30%. If we don't like you, we cut you off. We never have to explain why. We will never speak to you again. Are you okay with that? And a lot of people say yes. They're like, yeah, this is better than anything else I can do. The terms are horrible, but I accept them. And, you know, there are sites out there, Medium, Bandcamp, Patreon, YouTube. All of these have some kind of, monetization and revenue model. Now, I'm on YouTube. I have stuff on YouTube. And I make about $60 a month off YouTube for putting up, funny songs about software. Now, it's a little bit. It's not a lot of money. It's nothing like as much money as I think YouTube is making out of all the adverts they roll on it, but it's better than nothing. Now, for a long while, if you didn't want to run on one of these platforms, you could set up your own website, and then you're like, right, how do I make money out of a website? People aren't going to give me 10 cents every time they look at a page. I know I can run advertisements. And so web advertising used to be someone would ring you up and say, hey, we want to put adverts on your website. We sell cheese. Put an advert on the top of our website for cheese. And then they'd be like, all right, give me £50 a month, I guess. None of us really has any idea what we're doing. And they would. And you just run the advert. And then we got more sophisticated. And we started inventing click tracking, and we invented ways of telling people exactly how many times their advert was getting clicked and how quickly people clicked on it, and does the red advertisement get more clicks than the blue advertisement? And then we invented the broker. So instead of me talking to the cheese company, I talk to a broker, and they say, yeah, you put this JavaScript on your website, we'll do all the advertising sales for you. We'll just put content on your site that you don't know what it is and you've never seen it before, but hey, that doesn't matter. And then at the end of the month, we'll give you, I don't know, $10, $100, $1,000. It depends how many clicks and things you get. And then somebody worked out that we could run real-time micro-auctions. Now, if you go and look at a website right now, if I go and look at a website right now, what is happening behind the scenes is there is some code that says, hey, roll up, line up. We got a British white man, 43 years old. Last week he was looking at flights to Bucharest, rock and roll bars. We know he likes guitars. We know he likes cats. Who wants to give me 1 cent to show him an advertisement? Silence. 3 milliseconds later, 500 microcents, 200, 100, 50, 20. And eventually, one of those advertisers' sets of rules will go, yes, we will pay 20 microcents to advertise sports bras, because we'll pay 20 microcents to advertise a sports bra to anybody, because at that point, you've kind of run out of personalization. How does the advertising system know? Well, first of all, if you go onto a website, like our friend here, Mail Online, which is the worst newspaper in the United Kingdom, and we're going to go on here and we're going to have a look at the cookie settings. We're going to see what it is that we are actually consenting to. Okay, access information, yeah. Let's have a look at the vendors. Let's have a look at the number of companies who might want to show an advert at some point if I say that that's okay. This is not what the cookie legislation was designed for. There's 3,000 companies here who have put something somewhere that says under certain circumstances they will pay money to show me an advertisement. And the reason they know that the person looking at the page is 43-year-old British white guy who likes cats and guitars is because we are being tracked. We are using Google Search, Google Maps, Google this, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. All these services are building up a digital profile. Every time we do anything on the internet, we are leaving footprints. And these providers harvest all those footprints and they turn it into a profile. And if they get enough footprints, that is worth money to somebody. And the data generates the revenue. And the revenue means they can hire developers. And they hire developers and they're like, let's build more stuff that people want, and they give it away for free. And then you use it, because it's free, right? And you know the maxim of online commerce, if you're not paying money, you are the product, and the money is somewhere else. This is what's going on here, is we are the product, and we are being attracted onto these platforms by, and these are useful things. You know, Google search is brilliant. YouTube is amazing. I'm not saying they are bad, features, bad tools, but we are not the beneficiary of this. The data we create by using it is where the actual money is coming from. Now, the web, the internet, they are built on open protocols. HTTP, SMTP, DNS, and they're also built on the principle that as long as you are building software that follows these protocols, you get to play along with everybody else who is on the web. Now, I can build my website in Ruby, .NET Core, PHP, Java, Erlang, it doesn't matter, and you can look at it in Brave, you can look at it in Chrome, you can look at it in the Android browser on your phone. And because HTML and HTTP are standards, those things interoperate. And email has been built on the same principle, but there is a worrying trend going on at the moment. Gmail, just the Gmail service, has nearly 2 billion active users. That's a quarter of the human beings on this planet have an active Gmail account. Now, what would happen if Gmail turned around next week and went, we're not going to do other companies anymore. Gmail to Gmail, that's the future. How many of you would give up your Gmail account if Google said that? You know, you put your hand up because it's hypothetical. But now, I don't think Google are actually going to do this, but I have recently been jumping through these hoops. I own the domain dylanbeattie.net. It's never been used for anything except my personal website and my personal email. I've had it for 25 years, I think. And recently, it started saying that I would send people stuff and they wouldn't get it. And then I'd be like, I sent you like 3 emails, and they'd be like, oh, I found them in junk mail. And they sent me this. There's lots of messages have been identified as spam. Now, I've never sent spam. I've never even sent marketing email from that because I am terrible at marketing. So I just have this email I've been using, and suddenly Gmail, those 2 billion people have decided, or have it decided for them, that my email is junk now. And that gives me a problem. That means if I email any human being on this planet, there's a 25% chance it's going to go into their Google junk mail folder. So I've spent the last couple of weeks fooling around with DNS records and domain key identification and all this kind of stuff. And this is a worrying sign of a consolidation on closed platforms. We are moving away from open protocols, and we are starting to use Slack. We are starting to use Teams. How many of you have got an account on Discord? How many of you have got a Signal account? How many have Telegram? How many of you have all 5 of these things installed on your phone right now? Because you have to. Because if somebody says, we want to do business with you, meet us on Slack, you can't use Teams to join their Slack. You have to use Slack to join their Slack. You have to use Discord to talk to other people who use Discord. I got friends who use Telegram for various reasons. I got friends who insist on using WhatsApp, so I'm stuck on WhatsApp. And we have this consolidation away from open tools that can interoperate towards you all have to be on the same platform. Now, if any of you has been on Reddit recently, you know Reddit. Reddit's the website where people share links to other websites and then talk about how horrible they all are. And Reddit, first and foremost, is a website. It called itself the front page of the internet for a long, long time. But if you go to Reddit on your phone right now, first thing you get is this. Do you want to see this in the Reddit app? Open! Or do you want to continue in Chrome and it's gray and kind of muted? And you're like, no, I don't want to use the app. And so you go that and it says, hey, this page looks better in the app. And you say, no, thank you. And it says, look, the app has unlimited cats. And you're like, I'm a dog person. And it says, the app has unlimited dogs. And you say, not now. And then it's like, oh, well, you wanted to view this not safe for work content. Well, you can't do that on the website. You have to do that in the app. And this isn't even not safe for work. This was a screenshot of some crashed software that it got picked up by the flags or something. Reddit desperately does not want you using their website anymore. And I suspect that there are 2 reasons for this. One, when you use the app, you leave a richer trail of footprints. They know who you are. They know what kind of device you're using. They know how quickly you click on things. Do you click on red things or blue things or green things? And 2, you cannot install your ad blocker in somebody else's app, and that means that they cannot filter you out of their advertising ecosystem. Now, I was arrived in Bucharest a couple of days ago, and I did what I normally do when I get into a new town, is I'm like, if we end up at some point out late at night and we want to go somewhere, have a drink and see some music, where can we go? So I looked up rock bars in Bucharest, and I found this place, Rockabilly, and I looked at that. Now, that link there, that's not a website. Rockabilly doesn't have a website. Rockabilly has a Facebook page. They are running their entire internet presence on a free account provided by a $2 trillion American tech giant. WhatsApp is being pushed as a business communication solution. There's something like 200 million people in India use WhatsApp. You can order food on WhatsApp. You can order room service. You can get a plumber to come to your house. There are entire businesses out there now that are just on Facebook and WhatsApp. They don't have a website. They don't do email. If you dig into WhatsApp, yeah, you can find a telephone number, but they're not advertising it anywhere. The only place where they exist is on closed platforms. And most of the time, it works, because most of the time, those platforms are up. Most of the time. In October last year, October 4th, somebody was doing routine network maintenance in one of Facebook's data centers, and they made a mistake. And instead of verifying all of the routes that connect Facebook to the entire internet, they deleted all of the routes that connect Facebook to the entire internet. Apparently, there's supposed to be a tool that makes sure you can't do that, and apparently the tool didn't work either. And Facebook got locked out. They vanished. Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, they weren't there anymore. Within about 30 seconds, there was a massive spike in DNS traffic from the billions of browsers and mobile devices around the world that are suddenly going, whoa, Facebook.com isn't there. Let me go and check the phone book and see if I can remember where it's supposed to be. About a minute after that, there's a massive spike on Twitter and LinkedIn of people going, ha ha, Facebook's down. They were down for about 6 or 7 hours. And the reason why they were down for 7 hours is to fix it, they needed to get into the data center and they needed to fix this thing. They couldn't get in remotely because Facebook's not on the internet. They can't get in to their email because all the email servers have single sign-on, which works over the internet. They can't talk to each other because Facebook employees use Messenger and WhatsApp to communicate, and those things aren't working. They are unavailable. The people who drove down to the physical building where the servers are discovered they couldn't get in because the locks on the doors were plugged into the same authentication system as everything else, and guess what? That's not on the internet. So by the time they finally physically got into the building and rebooted all this stuff, it took about 7 hours to get them back online. But in the meantime, all of the people trying to get Facebook back online had to coordinate what they were doing using email and SMS messages and phone calls and good old-fashioned open communication protocols and standards. Now, these things are fantastic because they genuinely do connect the planet, almost all the planet. But those of you with keen eyes will remember, if you look at this map, there's this little gray area. Oh, look at this, I got steps. Isn't that great? This little gray area down the bottom there, Antarctica. And while I was researching this talk, I discovered internet access in Antarctica is a hell of a thing. Now, during the summer, Antarctica is home to about 5,000 people, scientists, researchers, astronomers, a whole bunch of ground crew and support staff. During the winter, that number drops to about 1,000 people. Now, in winter, Antarctica is dark for about 12 weeks. And you think, you're stuck there, you're in the dark for 12 weeks, you probably want to do like some Netflix streaming, maybe some online gaming. Internet in Antarctica is complicated. Now, for starters, there are no cables. There are no internet, submarine cables, no fiber, nothing physically connecting Antarctica to the rest of the planet. So you think, well, that's no big deal. We have satellite internet. That's totally a thing. Now, most satellite internet is provided from a cluster of geostationary satellites. They orbit about 35,000 kilometers above the equator. Now, these things are really handy because the way they orbit, they're always at the same point in the sky. So you take your satellite dish, you put it in the ground, you kind of line it up, you lock it in position, and that's it. You're on the internet. Antarctica is so far south, you cannot see these satellites. They are below the horizon. So all internet access in Antarctica comes from 2 satellite networks. This is a McMurdo station. It's at the southern tip of Ross Island on the Ross Ice Shelf. On a good day, during daylight, it gets about 25 megabits of bandwidth shared between 1,000 people, thanks to 3 satellites which are in a weird elliptic polar orbit, which are normally used to relay data to and from the International Space Station. When those satellites are out of sight, they fall back to something called the Iridium satellite network. Iridium has 66 satellites. They're in low Earth orbit. They cover the entire planet in 24/7 voice and data coverage. It is an incredibly good service. It is unbelievably expensive. You cannot stream on Iridium. They won't even give you a price for that. If you want to send an email, just plain text, no attachments, it costs about $3. And I was looking this up in one window while I had the whole Gmail DNS thing, and I suddenly thought, how upset would I be if I paid $3 to send an email and Gmail sent it to junk because it didn't think it was important? And I immediately thought, well, what if we flip that around? What if I was sending a really important email, and I wasn't in Antarctica, but I wanted to guarantee this thing wasn't going to go to junk? Where is the email equivalent of paying for premium delivery, priority mail, that kind of thing? Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to go back in time. We're going to jump back to the 1990s, and we're going to fix email before it was invented. Because in the 90s, about the time when I was starting to learn HTML, and people were getting mobile phones and Nokia phones and getting their first email address, it was really common when you got a mobile phone contract that it wasn't free. You would get a certain number of text messages included, and after that, you had to pay for them. And I thought, what if we'd done that with email? What if we said when you get an ISP, you get your first dial-up internet account, you get 50 free emails per month, and after that, they are going to cost 1 cent. So 50 free emails. After that, they cost 1 cent, and every time you send an email, your internet service provider takes a look at it. It's like, is this legit? Yep, fine. They deduct that from your balance, and then when they take the monthly payment, they top it up so you get another 50 free emails again. So if you send out an email to 25 people, hey, come to my birthday party, that's half your quota gone. Now, for starters, no one is ever going to send a Viagra advert to 10,000 people again, because they're like, I don't want to spend that much money advertising a product no one is ever going to buy. Now, let's talk about how email actually works. Now, we could probably have built this. You think about it, this is how email actually works today in the real world. If somebody out there wants to send an email to me, they go to the DNS infrastructure and they say, hey, who handles email for Dylan at dylanbeattie.net? And it says, hey, it's this box, mail.dylanbeattie.net. And so they connect to mail.dylanbeattie.net and they say, hey, I've got an email here from /@gunsandroses.com. And mail.dylanbeattie.net says, oh, yay, email. I don't verify that. There's no way to verify it. We are trying to invent ways to verify it, but none of them actually works terribly well. But what if, instead of that, the sender connects to DNS, and they say, hey, mail.dylanbeattie.net. So they connect to me, and they say, hey, I got an email from /@gunsandroses. Here is a message ID, globally unique identifier. And I then say to the DNS, hey, who handles email for Guns N' Roses? And they say, oh, Guns N' Roses email server is called Beatrice. We don't know why, it just is. So my mail server then goes to them and says, hey, did you send this email with this ID from / to Dylan? And it says, yes. And I'm like, oh, amazing, look, / is my mate. But actually what normally happens in real life is it says, nope, that was not / at all. That is this dude pretending to be /. By validating individual emails instead of trying to validate entire domains, we get transactional integrity around delivering a specific message to a specific person. And that opens up the option of you pay 1 cent to send an email, maybe you want to pay a couple of cents and have the additional money go to the recipient there. Now, validating these authentications, we've had Web of Trust certificates, we have SSL, we have the little green padlock that means this website is secure. Now, really, the only thing the green padlock means now is that there's a certificate. That's pretty much it. But I remember the first time I got one of these certificates, I had to fax about 20 pages of legal documentation to prove that I was the legal entity I was claiming to be before they would give me a certificate. We kind of gave up on that because we decided that encryption is more important than authenticating identity, but that doesn't mean the technology doesn't support it. We could build a secure cryptographic web of certificates for people who we trust that at the end of the month they are going to pay their email bill, and we could build a system based on this, and then we could have the ability to say, well, I need to send this email to the big shot lawyer, and it's really important, it's from me. It's the really important legal documents, and so I'm going to pay 50 cents to get this priority level 1. And now we can email people money. Not bank transfers. We can send an email that's actually worth something. When they receive this, their email balance goes up by 50 cents. You want to play Wordle? Email play@wordle.com. Attach 5 cents, and suddenly Josh logs in, and he's like, I've got $187,000 in my email account here. Well, that's interesting. And now, obviously, the problem is, how do you cash out? How do you get the money back out of the system at the other end? Now, banking solves problems like this every day. It seems unusual because it's kind of heresy that you could turn email back into real money, but there's no technical reason why we couldn't do this. You could just go through it. You're going to lose a bit, but you go through it, you're like, all right, I need to invoice Gmail for $15,000, Outlook for $8,000, Yahoo Mail for $28 this month, whatever. You go through that process, but what if you don't need to cash out? What if you're like, well, I've got $5,000 in my email account right now. I'm going to use that to pay my Netflix. I'm going to use that to buy the new game that's out on Steam. I'm going to use that to buy the new Ghost album. If you never need to cash out, what you create is a closed ecosystem of digital cash that has nothing to do with the banking system. Now, if it sounds like this would never work, it's already worked. In Kenya, there is a system called M-Pesa, and M-Pesa started out as a bunch of people with no bank accounts who realized they could send each other mobile phone credit by text message, and it turned into a de facto currency. You could pay for your doctor's bill. You take your kid to the doctor, you can pay them by sending a text message with 20 minutes of airtime, 2 hours of airtime. You could buy beer with this. You could buy football tickets with this. And then Vodafone went in, and they're like, that's not really what we designed the phones for, but this looks pretty cool. They turned it into a product. They established it. Now in Kenya, M-Pesa has been transformative. It is still the dominant payment system across almost the entire country. They launched M-Pesa. Have any of you used it? Because they launched it in Romania in 2014, and then they withdrew it in 2017 because it never caught on. In Kenya, it was the right thing at the right time for people who had no alternative. In Romania, by the time it rolled out, the kind of Vodafone's thing is, most people in Romania, by that time, they had a bank account, they had internet access, and so the idea of a non-internet-based, non-banking-based digital currency just never gained traction. And so they shut the thing down. But in Kenya, it's represented a path out of poverty for something like 220,000 households. It is completely ubiquitous. Trying to shut this down in Africa now would be like telling Europe that they're not allowed to use Visa or MasterCard anymore. Now, while we're back along the alternate timeline back in history, we're just going to tweak a couple more things. One of them is authentication is completely broken. I have to remember 450 passwords, so instead I have a company who I pay to remember them for me, and if that company ever gets broken into, basically I'm going to give up and go and live in a cave somewhere. But you ever have this when you sign into Slack, and it's like, oh, don't worry about a password, you give us your email, we're going to send you an email, you click the email, that will sign you in, because that way we can verify your identity. Why don't we take this and do the same thing, but instead of being based on email, you've probably had this experience where you're on a website and you're browsing around and you say, I want to find my nearest store to my current location, and the website pops up this thing. That service over there is asking for access to some information that you control. This is your personal data, your current location on this planet, and it is saying, hey, please can I know this? And you get a box in your browser saying, are you comfortable for this company to know where you are right now? And you say, yeah, I am, actually, that's going to be useful. Why don't we extend this model? What if you went onto Amazon to buy some stuff, and you get a box pop up in your browser that says, hey, Amazon wants to sign in as you, and also it wants to know where you live, wants your delivery address. And you're like, yeah, okay, that's cool. And then when you move house, you update it once in your browser, or in your internet provider, your mail provider, and everywhere you go, it's like, yeah, delivery address, there it is. It's not in their database anymore. It's in my database that I control, or that I've given somebody I trust and asked them to do it for me. We could go a step further. Imagine you went onto Amazon and a box popped up saying, Amazon will pay $1 for your browsing history. And you're like, is that worth something? That's my data. I own that. I control that. I should know what's in it. And if people are going to make profit out of mining it for statistics, I should have access to that profit. I am part of the value chain there. This is my data. I want my cut. Now, this is the point where there's a couple of people going, yeah, we can do the whole thing with blockchains because, yeah, blockchain is really exciting and everyone is very, very kind of, excitable about what blockchains and Bitcoin and NFTs and decentralized finance and decentralized autonomous organizations can do. And this, by the way, these are some of my actual blockchains. And this thing here, before long you start talking about NFTs. And the problem with talking about NFTs at the moment is when you say NFT, half the audience stops listening. And when you say are a terrible idea, the other half stops listening. And so you've lost your whole audience in one sentence. This picture, by the way, this was for sale on OpenSea for $20,000. But what I did is I right-clicked and I downloaded it and I put it in here. And I did that in London, and now I'm here in Romania, which makes me an international art thief. Isn't that brilliant? Now, I don't really understand the hype and the bubble that's going on. I do know that I keep seeing headlines like this one, that somebody who bought a tweet for $3 million. By the way, do you know how you sell a tweet for $3 million? You go up to someone and you go, hey, psst, do you want to buy a tweet for $3 million? And if they say yes, you take their $3 million and you walk away. And you don't ask too many questions. That's how NFT actually works. So they bought this for $3 million. Then they tried to sell it for $48 million, and it ended at $280. So I don't know, maybe this just wasn't the investment that it turned out to be. Maybe that was a bad week for NFTs. Certainly, I am seeing lots and lots of these headlines, and every time somebody who's out there going, decentralized finance is the future, it's completely independent of the governments, the man wants to control you, the banks are evil, and someone steals all of their apes or all of their Bitcoin, the first thing they do is they go to the police. And it's like, I thought you didn't like authoritarian government. Like, either you're on your own or you're not. You're not allowed to go out decentralizing finance and then try and use the authoritarian government to get your money back. But the thing I think is interesting about Web 3.0 and decentralized finance and everything is I remember Web 2.0. And I remember when Web 2.0 hadn't happened yet. And lots of people were talking about it, but none of them really knew what it was. Now, with hindsight, We appear to have said, oh, Web 2.0 was obviously social media. It was YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and people uploading their own stuff. But at the time, there were people saying, there was a conference, the Web 2.0 conference by O'Reilly Media in 2014, I think. And one of the sessions at that conference was, what is Web 2.0? And there were people saying Web 2.0 is microformats. It's being able to embed machine-readable data inside web pages. Other people saying it's the semantic web. Other people saying, no, Web 2.0 is Ajax. No, Web 2.0, that's RSS feeds. That's what the future's about. No, it's not. It's XML. No, it's not. It's Atom. No, it's not. It's SOAP. No, it's REST APIs. No, it's blogs. No, it's reviews. Now, all of these technologies, some of them have become ubiquitous. Ajax is just how the web works now. Blogs had a massive spike, and then social media came along, and people kind of stopped writing on their own blog because they were putting stuff on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook instead, and so that kind of declined. And with it, RSS and Atom, they had a glory day in the sun. We invented podcasts as a side effect of all this, and podcasts have definitely survived long beyond the technology which incubated them in the first place. Microformats kind of never took on. Semantic web, the people are still out there going, no, Web 3.0 is semantic web, and I guarantee in 5 years they're going to be going, Web 4.0 is the semantic web. And, semantic web is an interesting idea, but it doesn't have the kind of mass traction. But underneath all of these ideas was a growing awareness among the people who built the web that consumers, real people, the rest of the world, they were fed up of the web being read-only. And they didn't want to have to set up an Apache server and learn how to use front page. They just wanted to write stuff. They wanted to put up photos of them and their friends. They wanted to write essays and share a journal and put up little videos they'd made and all these kinds of things. And all of these technologies, to some extent, were people who saw that need, saw that desire, and went, I think I have a solution for how we can fix that. And so when people start talking about Web 3.0, all these things, NFTs, decentralized finance, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, the Ethereum blockchain, what I actually see underneath all of the technological hype is an awareness that users out there are kind of fed up of being treated as the product. There's a lot of people going, you know what, this was free, and it was convenient, and it was fun, but actually I would rather pay money for something that isn't selling me. I am quite happy to just pay you. If you are going to get rich off my data, then I want a part of that. I want a cut, not the 30 cents a month that you think I'm worth. I want a transparent role in that interaction and that conversation. So maybe that's, one day we're going to look back on Web3 and say that was when we decided that we are not going to accept the terms and conditions. We want to get paid for the things we create. We want the revenue, the recognition for our music, our art, our blog posts, our documentation, our open source code. And in exchange, we will pay money for the things that we use. We will figure out a way that if your blog post is worth 10 cents, I can give you 10 cents without having to get my credit card out of my pocket. Because the web and the internet, they shouldn't belong to trillion-dollar tech giants, They belong to us. You, me, anyone out there who has a good idea and an internet address to share it from. Thank you.